Here's Fox's Harris Faulkner. She's on with I don't know, I guess a right-wing radio host from Seattle. Guy's name is Jason Rantz.
He's always the guy who comes in and is like, liberal cities have a ton of crime. That's like his big thing. Like, I live in Seattle. I'm a Republican.
God, it's been a long time since I saw a young radio guy who changed his name. I'm quite sure Rantz is not really his name. I'm sure he changed that for radio, but maybe he didn't. Who knows? And of course, if you're on Fox, you know what your number one ratings getter is. A woman of color. So they're digging around. It's hard for them to find, like, who's in the news these days? How come there's no black people taking a knee that we can talk about? Or
it's
something
just so
like that?
Inconvenient that the president's an old white guy.
Yes, darn it. And San Francisco politics doesn't resonate because people have forgotten. It's like what they used to say about Obama. The guy's like totally like Chicago politics, and everybody's like, what? Like deep dish pizza? Like nobody remembers. Everybody you're talking to is dead. Here's their go-to.
That we need to course correct because you're not going to.
Real quickly, and I'm going to ask my team if we can just get to AOC. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez now. Critics are calling her out for being what they call tone deaf in a complaint. AOC said in an Instagram post that her six-figure salary just isn't enough. Members of Congress make about $174,000 annually. But she says because lawmakers are required to have homes in both Washington, D.C. and the state they live in and represent, that the money doesn't cut it. And you say what, Jason?
So I say, certainly the timing is not ideal. She's not wrong. And believe me, I hate having to agree with AOC, but I do think that when you are requiring someone to have two residences, particularly in high-cost neighborhoods, you are self-limiting the type of person who might want to run for Congress. Now, AOC did, and she's a horrible example, but there are a lot of really good people who simply can't afford to run because they...
Pause it for a second. She's got to live in New York and Washington, D.C., like two of the most expensive places in the country. Why is she such a bad messenger for this?
Well, honestly, it's just because she's bad, and I can't get I won't get invited back on Fox News if I say I agree with her. But like the thing about it is that AOC is in a unique position to actually earnestly make this case because of what you say. One, the two places she has to live, and two, she's one of the few Congress people that doesn't have all this outside income from, past corporate lobbying, right, eventual future corporate lobbying, family money. She doesn't have that cushion. So it does, in her case, make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's different it's different for AOC than if you're like Rep. Don Bayer from Virginia, who's literally worth like $200 million.
Yes.
Independently before he became a member. He probably doesn't need that $174,000 salary. AOC was a bartender before this. She needs the salary.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
She didn't have health insurance until she got into Congress.
How cheap could an apartment be in Washington, D.C. and in particularly in her area, is gentrifying quickly. But I mean, how cheap could they be? Like, could she be living in both places for less than $3,000 or $4,000 a month? Like, that would be...
No. Well, I mean, I'm sure... Yeah. I remember when she got an apartment in D.C., the New York Post was writing up about how it was some sort of, a luxury development or whatever. But one, she's a congressperson. She needs a safe place to live with a doorman building. If there's anybody in Congress who needs some sort of protection, it's her, it's Ilhan Omar, etc. So she needs a certain layer of it. She doesn't have what all these other members have. And in the grand scheme of things, their salary is just a drop in the bucket in terms of what we of our system. And frankly, I would honestly be in favor of raising their salaries because maybe they'd be less reliant on outside money.
Exactly, and less and be willing not to basically be building an opportunity to get money, corporate lobbying. I wonder if they were bummed. I wonder if they were really bummed, like, Jason really let us down. Wait, can you come around and say, go back a little bit. Let's hear why she's a bad spokesperson for this. Even though, incidentally, like, she's probably pretty close. I don't know. If you, the Venn diagram of least wealthy in the most expensive places to live, you know, I don't know, maybe Bowman also.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know what Bowman's like. He was a teacher. At least he's got, like, you know, maybe he's vested in his pension and whatnot. But
Older. Yeah.
but I, you know, in terms of the two places that are expensive and also the Venn diagram of the largest following on Instagram, which is probably just her, period. And she's alone in that. Like, she's actually the best person. If you genuinely believe this is a problem, which I happen to think is a problem, she's probably the best messenger for it.
They live in and represent, that the money doesn't cut it. And you say what, Jason?
So I say, certainly the timing is not ideal. She's not wrong, and believe me, I hate having to agree with AOC, but I do think that when you are requiring someone to have two residences, particularly in high-cost neighborhoods, you are self-limiting the type of person who might want to run for Congress. Now, AOC did, and she's a horrible example, but there are a lot of really good people who simply can't afford to run because they can't afford to be lawmakers, and we don't like it when lawmakers somehow miraculously get rich while they're in office, maybe because they're taking certain kinds of votes that might have been influenced by people who can make them wealthy down the line. So maybe we should at least have a conversation about stipends for housing. Not for some of this other stuff, but for housing, I think, is a reasonable conversation, especially when you consider all of the hours that some of these folks are putting on when they work and live on the East or on the West Coast and have to travel to the East Coast. So I do think that there is a bigger conversation. I just wish AOC wasn't the person who's bringing it up, because she is not a good example of anyone wants to lead. She's an insufferable millennial. So she's still right though on this. It's just wrong time, bad timing.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So if we don't want people to be tempted, then maybe we, as a society and those on Capitol Hill, have to take a look at our expectations for where they live and how they represent and all of that. That's really, really interesting. Jason Ray.
I mean, it's also
That's really,
super
really
obvious.
interesting.
That's really.
really interesting.
Don't
Like,
book him. Do not book him again.
get off my goddamn
Super interesting,
television.
but you just cost us the quarter hour.
Minute by minute
that
viewers
we were hoping for.
are decreasing.
And you tried to salvage it by saying AOC's insufferable at the end, but we already know. Everyone already
Millennials are
turned.
so yesterday.
They already
Jason.
turned off their TV,
The fact that
dumbass.
she's a millennial is also another thing that makes her the perfect person to represent this, because she would have the least amount of money just in terms of age, generally speaking. And also, she is a perfect example of somebody who could immediately walk away tomorrow and make how many times her salary now by doing just about anything, you know, for corporate America.
Oh my God.
And so really the best, it's really bumming him out. And then of course she's bummed out because she doesn't get the attack on that. It's going to like fry some brains of their old white guy viewership. But yeah, she's a bad spokesperson for that.
This guy is just not going to make it. He's not going to make it. He does not know what his role is. He had a huge opportunity. He's on KTTH radio in Seattle, Jason Rance. You wanted to move up in the world. You wanted to make a name for yourself, maybe get something on Fox Nation, their streaming service. That was not the way to do it, buddy.